Welcome to Dallas. I'm Reagan, and I'm so happy that you're here with us this morning. We have some exciting things coming up that I want to invite you to. This Wednesday night, we're having a worship night. We are joining another North Point partner church in Reston. Both of our worship teams will lead us starting at 7 p.m. It's going to be a great time to worship together, and I hope that you all will join us. All of the details are on our Dallas app, so if you haven't already, download our app and click events. We love gathering together in different places in our community, and we especially love our winery gatherings. So on Sunday, May 29th, we will be gathering at 50 West instead of Lightridge High School. We will have communion together, hear God's heart and Pastor Brad's message, and then enjoy hanging out with one another after the gathering. Details for this will also be on our app. 2 weeks ago, my dad talked about the most exciting idea on earth. You can listen to that message from May 8th on our YouTube channel or on our new podcast. This summer, Pastor Brad is going to take us further into this idea of building the kind of church Jesus was designing. So, this summer, will you prioritize our Sunday mornings together? It's going to be a great summer, and I'm so excited. Happy Sunday, Dallas. I love that we get to spend this morning together.
Hey, for the next minute, we're going to watch a video from Mayor Marcin in Zaplanik, Poland. I'm so proud of all of you, all of us, for responding so quickly. In 6 days, we met our $2,500 goal to help them with projects as they have been inundated with refugees. Let's watch this video from Mayor Marcin.
Hello, brothers and sisters from Dallas Community Church in Northern Virginia. I would like to thank you very much for your heart for the refugees from Ukraine. We collect money to renovate the building for them. This is a priority because we don't have a place to live for them anymore. Now there are about 350 refugees, mothers with children, and there may be more of them. Only 7,000 people live in Chaplinek, and we are not able to help them ourselves. So any help is very important to us. I bless you and thank you again. You are great. Best regards from Chaplinek, Marcin.
Okay, there's not a person that I'm talking to right now who doesn't want to generate wealth, become wealthy in their lives in order to take care of other people, in order to do good, in order to give back, to make a difference. I doubt there's a single person who isn't compelled by that idea for your life. That's my vision for my life. I would love to have wealth to give away. And Jesus tells us that can start now. We don't have to wait until we're rich or until we have so much more. So last week we talked about how Jesus, as a topic, as a singular focus, puts in front of us the subject of money more than any other subject, more than heaven and eternity, more than anything. He talks about money, and this is because he knows that money has the unparalleled ability, like nothing else on earth, to reveal what's really going on in the human heart. So the question that we asked last week is, how much is enough? We are people, as humans, we lean toward, we have the propensity toward feeling we never have enough. We need just a little bit more. And so Paul addresses this to Timothy, who's a pastor of Ephesus, a church in metropolitan Ephesus in modern-day Turkey. It was one of the largest cities in the Mediterranean world. And this church is emerging. Timothy's the pastor. And Paul says, teach your church to use their money to do good. They should be rich in good works and in generosity. And this is that phrase that we have locked in before in years past, and we did last week here as a faith community, is to be rich, to dream about, to set our lives, to order our lives around being rich in generosity. Now, Paul doesn't say, hey, do good and give back from time to time. He focuses on the actual word of generosity. There's a difference between giving and generous. So giving is about something that you do from time to time. Generosity is about who you're becoming, who God is turning you into as your ethos, as your way of life. Now, we looked at Luke 16 where Jesus tells this wild story, a complicated story, and he unpacks it by explaining that the man in the story, in the parable, is managing the wealth of a rich person who owns an estate. And he says this and is helping his listeners understand it. Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. And whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. And Jesus is getting at the point that we're all managers. When it comes to our resources, when it comes to our retirements, when it comes to our incomes, our homes, our possessions, we're actually managers. His view, his design for us has always been that we're managers, not owners. Jesus was helping us, we looked at last week, that our money, he's helping us understand this counterintuitive idea, counterintuitive to the way of this world, the way we've been taught, that money is a means to an end. Money doesn't make your life meaningful. It doesn't make you meaningful. Money is a means to an end. That's the meaning of meaning when anything is a means to an end. And when your life becomes a means to an end, your money will follow. I also talked last week at the end about how Amy and I, when we got married, decided to give away a percentage of our income. We're just always going to do that. Most of that is directed toward our church, and we live on the rest. And for people where that's a new concept, or maybe that seems extreme, it's easy to think of other people like, well, when I get to this level, or if I were like my neighbor, I could do more, I could give back more, I could think about others more. But if you want to be generous when you have more, you have to start practicing generosity when you have less. It's all relative. And studies continue to show us this is counterintuitive. This is hard for us to get our heads around. I actually used to debate this, like this can't be true. And then I saw the studies and the data for myself that the more Americans earn, the less they give away. Our tendency is to think that philanthropic giving and nonprofits are supported mostly by the rich or the wealthiest of the wealthy. It's actually the opposite. The less someone earns in America, the more on average they give away. That's because, and studies show us this, the more someone has, the more they have to lose. And what follows is a sense of control, fear in losing more, hoarding, and we've got to begin now the practice of generosity if we ever hope to give away our resources and help others in need when we have more. Okay, so today, Jesus consistently talked about how we are to be managers, not owners. And the question is, managers for who exactly? He tells another story. This is in Matthew 25. Again, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his wealth to them. To one, he gave 5 bags of gold, to another 2 bags, and to another 1 bag, each according to his ability. Then the man went on his journey. So I've said this to you often over the years. When you read scripture, don't read it just for information. This is where people find themselves bored and scripture seems irrelevant when you're just reading to learn information. When you read scripture prayerfully, specifically asking, where's God in the story that I'm reading and where am I? Where is God in this scripture, in this text that I'm reading today, and where am I in this text? You'll start to see yourself in the heart of God in your heart, and maybe something that you need to let go of or surrender or trust to God. And Jesus specifically designed his parables this way. His parables are the fable-like stories that speak to a reality of God's character or a reality of God's plan. something that God designed you and me for, a reality of the human condition. And so specifically in Jesus' parables, there's always one character who represents God, and there's always at least one character who represents you. And so in this parable, the master is the one who represents God, and the servant represents you and me. So it's interesting here that the master doesn't give bags of gold to his servants. He doesn't give it away to them. He owns the gold. The percentage of ownership of the resources here is 100% belongs to the owner, the master. The servant is made a manager. He's entrusted as a manager for a period of time. Now, here's what happens in the story. I'm going to skip ahead here. The servant who's entrusted with the 5 bags of gold invests it. We're not told how. Jesus doesn't get specific in what he does exactly with it. But he's responsible enough that the 5 bags of gold doubles and becomes 10 bags of gold. The servant entrusted with 2 bags of gold doubles his entrusted amount, and he ends up with 4 bags of gold. The servant with 1 bag of gold does not manage the master's money well, and he ends up burying it, Jesus tells us. And when the master returns, the one with 5 now has 10, and the one with 2 now has 4, but the one with 1 still has 1. And this is what happens in our reading of this. If you're like me, I remember hearing this story for the first time many, many years ago, and I got lost or distracted in the sort of the question of fairness. Well, why would one be entrusted with so much more and another entrusted with so much less? And that's not the point of the story. Jesus is telling us that for some reason, his reasoning, some people in this world are entrusted with more resources. I still, to this day, want to question sometimes the fairness of someone who didn't even finish high school, who starts a computer company in his garage and it goes global and the person becomes a billionaire. We can sit around all day and talk about, well, that's not fair. We can't answer those questions, and that's not the point of this story. The point of this story is that the servants don't own any of this money, none of the bags of gold. The owner, the master, owns all of it. The servants don't get to keep even a percentage of the return. You would think that the one who earned the 5 bags as an investment or return on his investment would be rewarded with money that he just gets to keep for himself. He does get rewarded as part of the story, but with further money to invest further. It's a fascinating story where Jesus is turning on its head the notion of how you and I are taught, how we've been raised to believe that our money is ours. We say things like how much money you earn, your paycheck. You know, it's ours. It's ours. It's our checking account. And yet when we step into Jesus' kingdom, we're confronted with this reality that he sees it as his. And that our money, our resources are a means to an end. We get distracted with the fairness question, like, well, why did he get this amount? And why did she only get this much? Or vice versa. And the question is, how much was entrusted with certain people? That's not the point of the story. The right question is, really the point of Jesus' story is, what did they do with it? How did they manage what was entrusted to them? How are you managing what's entrusted to you? Again, just as a reminder, we live in, and it doesn't feel this way, when we're financially stressed, when we have mortgages, it doesn't seem like we live in the wealthiest county or the wealthiest couple of counties in the United States. The U.S. Census Bureau tells us that about Loudoun County and Fairfax County. How are you managing the resources that God has put in front of you? I want to tell you today about how important stories are to me. You've heard me talk about this. We do cinema series here at church. If you're new with us in the last year, this has become a favorite kind of series. We'll do this again in the future where we take short scenes from recent movies or TV series, and we use them as parables in church to talk out real life principles that matter to God. I tell stories. I study storytellers. Stories are the emotional glue of community, of relationships. We really have just surface relationships with people until we hear their story and we learn more of their stories. And when we begin to open up and tell our story, good or bad or tragic, that is when people emotionally are closer. That's when trust is built. I started a film festival, as many of you know. Many of you are part of the festival. A lot of you are leaders, volunteer leaders in the festival, the Washington West Film Festival. And we started the film festival uniquely. We're the only one in the world that gives away 100% of the box office dollars during festival week. And we do this so that our audience members are a part of creating real life stories, stories of hope in communities that are struggling. In fact, our tagline in the film festival is "Story can change the world." You know, that's our hashtag that we really kind of coined that phrase, "Story can change the world." Stories are very important to me, and they're important to us as a faith community. And Andy Stanley so well in his book, Andy has influenced a lot of my teaching and thinking about money over the years. And he wrote a book a number of years ago called "If Money Could Talk." And he simply asks this question. He narrows it down to such a powerful question. Are you investing in stuff or in stories? Specifically, are you living your life for stuff? Or are you living your life for stories? Do you want more stuff? Or do you want more stories? Now, you may not have thought this consciously in giving to Dulles Church here during the pandemic, but I'm going to give you a story here. I want to share a story with you. There are many that I could tell, many examples. And I'm going to tell one here as we get near the end of our time together. You made it possible in your giving to Dulles Church during the uncertain times for all of us financially. Your giving allowed us to hire another pastor. We hired Andrew, and we celebrated that last week at Lightridge High School in appointing Andrew officially as a pastor. And I could tell 50 or 60 stories about the impact of Andrew. And I don't know if you were thinking, I'm investing in more stories unfolding when you were giving to Dulles Church. But here's one story that just happened. I literally could pull 60 or 70 here. This just happened about 10 days ago on my front step. A friend of mine that I've known here for years, here in Northern Virginia, came to my house, rang my doorbell, and I was like, "Hey, what's up?" And I stepped outside and we just started chatting, and he looked very concerned or heavy-hearted, and I was like, "What's going on? What's really going on?" And he told me that he just recently lost a friend who took their own life. This is a friend he's known for years, and he just told me, "Man, for the last 2 weeks, I've had trouble sleeping. This has just been haunting me. It's distracted me in my work." And I could just see the heaviness on him. And he said, "I want to tell you that someone close to me said that it's unfortunate that God doesn't receive people who take their own lives. God rejects them." And he explained and elaborated more that this friend of mine is telling me that another friend was telling him that God doesn't receive people or love people who have taken their own lives. And that has been haunting my friend for the 2 weeks since the loss of his friend. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is just, and I wanted to correct this bad theology that he had heard from someone else. And before I could, he said, "And you know, I ran into Andrew the other day. Andrew, who you guys hired at your church." And by the way, this is somebody who doesn't go to church. He's told me numerous times that he wants to try Dulles. He thinks about it. He's not sure he wants to trust church. He said, "Andrew, who you hired at your church, I ran into him a few days ago, and I told him this story. And Andrew could tell that something was wrong. And went through the whole background that I just explained to you, and Andrew said to our mutual friend, that's wrong. God doesn't reject somebody for a mistake. God never turns away from us, even from our worst mistakes, even from the darkness of what we struggle with. God is always with us and always loves us. And Mike is telling me this in his own words. He's telling me what Andrew had been telling him, and he had big tears in his eyes. And he said, Brad, I slept so well that night. It was the first time I slept in 2 weeks. I went to bed with peace in my heart, believing maybe God really is like Andrew was saying. And at the end of the story, he said, I know I've told you before I'm going to come to Dulles, but I really am. Like, I just think what you guys think or the way you look at God is just so different. And in his own words, he was describing how he's feeling drawn or pulled to Dulles. Man, I just walked away again so proud of Andrew and so thankful that Andrew's a voice here with us at Dulles Church. When you gave financially to Dulles through the pandemic, you probably weren't thinking consciously, I'm investing in amazing stories that Andrew's going to be helping make possible or create. You probably weren't thinking that you were making stories possible. But that's exactly what we're about here at Dulles. We're about connecting with people where they've been in real life, struggles, fears, and introducing the real story of Jesus to people. And often we do that by transparently telling our own story, our own regrets, our own challenges, our own anger at God, our own just simple mistakes, or sometimes, depending on the relationship, we open up enough to tell about some kind of shame that we've struggled with. This is the connective tissue. This is what helps people trust. This is where you and I actually influence others, where we shine light into dark places. When we talk about the light of Jesus that actually shone into our dark places. And I was just so proud of Andrew. And for so many of you that have similar stories happening every week, we want to be investors here at Dulles. Not in more stuff. When people look back on your life, they're not going to talk about the stuff in your life. They're going to tell stories about you. And we're just all in on that here at Dulles. Alton, just this morning at breakfast, told me that he looked at his house one day. He saw images on TV again about Ukraine refugees and some of these moms leaving. And he quoted one mom that he had just seen here recently who talked about leaving her house and everything. And she said, I don't know if we'll ever see this house again. She left all of her appliances and possessions and their clothes, everything they own. She's leaving with her kids. And she said, this is it. This is all we can carry. And Alton was, saying this with emotion this morning at breakfast. Like, he said he stopped and looked around his house and thought, wow, what if I was in that situation where it was just instantly gone? Everything I see is gone. Like, how would I define my life? Do I define my life by my stuff, by this stuff? Is this what life is about? Or am I defining my life by the impact I'm making in others, in the lives of others? And I said, Alton told us the story without knowing this was going to be my point this weekend. And I said, Alton, listen to what I'm going to say this week about the power of stories. Are we investing in stuff or stories? I just took that as just an indication from God. I really did when Alton told that story. Like, this is what God is putting in front of us this week. Are we wanting or needing more stuff? Is that what our future is? Or are we wanting and needing and investing in stories and more stories? That's what we're about here at Dulles, and that's what we're inviting you to help us be as storytellers and people who cherish stories and make stories possible here in this place that we call Dulles Church. One more quick point. I'm citing Andy Stanley again here. From a few years ago, he made this point so well. He said, we're so quick to give God our internal stuff. Troubles, crisis, fear, especially in the church context where we're trusting the church, we're trusting God, we're learning to trust Him. We'll give Him mistakes that we've made. We'll open up about challenges in our lives, fears or anxieties that we have. But when it comes to our money, we struggle. We struggle to give him or to see that what we have is actually his. And giving back a percentage of what we make is actually a statement of worship. God, this actually belongs to you. You're my provider. I'm managing what belongs to you. And Andy so succinctly said this. I just love this, and it's stuck with me. If you haven't surrendered what you have to God, he doesn't actually have you. If you haven't surrendered what you have, what you own, what you possess, if you haven't surrendered those things to God, then he doesn't actually have you. And so this 2-part series ends with an invitation. Wherever you watch from, if this is part of your faith experience, and it is because you watch with us, if you join us many weeks here, if we're an encouragement to you, we consider you part of the Dulles Church family, and we are invested in you. We ask you to invest with us. We ask you to give back to God here at Dulles Church. Help us not just pay the bills and manage our budget well. Help us live into our future of being people that want to invest in stories, not more stuff. There's 4 ways you can give here at Dulles. 2 are digitally, 1 through our website. In a similar way, you can give through our app, our Dulles Church mobile app. Another is in the lobby at Lightridge High School. You can give cash or checks in the giving box in the lobby. And a 4th way that people don't often think about is through stocks. We receive stock donations. We receive sometimes 1 or 2 a year. It really goes a long way in helping us finance what we're about here at Dulles. Thank you for your giving here. Thank you for stepping in faith into the lives of people and others as we invest into this community. I love you guys so much. Let me pray with you. God, our possessions, our incomes, our resources, our cars, our houses, our savings accounts, we're so grateful. We're grateful that we live in this era, this generation, and where we live, all the resources at our disposal. God, we see them as coming from you, and we see that what's in front of us, that's what's been entrusted to us, actually is not ours. We see ourselves as managers of what belongs to you. Help us to be a means to an end. Help our lives to be a means to an end. May we see our money as a means to a greater end of living out your plan, your purpose for the people around us. We put our faith and trust in you, Jesus, and we demonstrate that with our generosity. I love you, Dulles family, so much. Those of you who live in the Dulles area, we're at the winery next week. We're going to take communion together. I'll give a short message. It'll be a sweet time together, and then we'll hang out and eat together and have fun. Bring your own lunch. Bring your own camping chairs. For those who watch online, I'll be seeing you online next Sunday morning. Just know that you're loved.